Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now in today's one we're taking a look at another pre-built gaming PC, and as you can see this pre-built, well, it certainly has a few construction issues. This was actually shipped to me a couple of days ago. It arrived last night, the night before I recorded this voiceover, and as soon as I opened the box and took it out, well, I noticed that it was absolute carnage inside this case, and it highlights one of the horrors of having a pre-built PC shipped to you. Obviously this doesn't happen every time, but on the rare occasion that someone decides to kick the package all the way from the depot to your house, well, you may open the side panel to find something like this. Let's discuss in a little more detail though what exactly I think has happened here. So I like this little Molex to Molex to Molex adapter thing going on. This is certainly unique and was not the fault of the shipping company. The graphics card I think fell out because the clip on the motherboard on the PCI Express connector is broken, and the power cable seems to have shaken itself loose as well, unless it was unplugged before it was sent. You know, I have seen some people do that before, but it's not really necessary. Yeah, this is certainly a pretty messy PC, both on the outside and on the inside. There's also a couple of dents on the case. But let's get to the bottom of what is inside this thing. I apologise for the state of my garden today. We had a pretty big storm last night. Everything's blown about a bit and it's currently under a little bit of personal renovation. But yeah, things will be tidier hopefully in the next video. The graphics card that I dug out of this system was actually an MSI R9 270 2GB card, which really isn't a bad start at all. It was fairly clean. There was a few little blobs of dust under the fans here, but with a simple dust from the air blower, it soon came up pretty neat and shiny. If we take a look at the back here just to confirm the model, yeah, this is an R9 270 gaming 2GB card from MSI. I really like the look of these MSI cards with the dual fan coolers here. Back in the day it was a decent sort of mid-range option, and it'll be interesting to see if it can still hold up in 2020. Let's just get a little bit more of the excess dust off of the fans here. Now the PC was actually advertised with 8 gigs of RAM, but I opened it up and actually found 16 gigs hidden away under all of the cables. Sorry, 20 gigs. I found two 8 gig sticks that matched, and then this extra 4 gig stick of DDR3 here. When I put this thing back together, I'll probably just use 16 gigs because these two match. It's 1600 megahertz DDR3. I've never heard of the brand before, but as long as it's working, there should be no issues. Now the hard drive is a 2TB Western Digital Green Power drive. I think this is a 5400 RPM drive, so it's not the best for a PC. This system was probably built a while ago. It's a 2012 drive, so it's certainly seen some usage over the years. I'd recommend these days for anyone building a new system to use an SSD, the biggest SSD they can afford to, but hard drives are still a decent, cheaper option if you are on a tighter budget. We also got a DVD drive, which is quite nice. Now, a lot of people don't use these, especially those of you who live where there is faster internet, but I still have GTA 5 on disc, the 8 discs to be precise that it came with. I think it was 8, so it can be handy for some people, and I'll probably sell this one on. With a lot of components out of the way, we can get a better look inside. We've also got the Corsair CX 430 power supply in here. Everyone used to recommend these back in the day. Everything else looks pretty good. There's no other snapped pieces of motherboard flying around the case. I don't know where the PCI Express clip got to, whether or not this was broken before it was sent or not, but everything else looks to be okay. It's time to get the processor and motherboard bundle out now and see what we've got going on there. The back of the case where the graphics card goes also took a bit of a beating. As you can see, it's pretty bent here. This may have happened as the graphics card got ripped out of its slot. The screw is still in the top there as well. So yeah, aside from all the dents, we've also got some dust, a lot of dust to be honest, but let's get the motherboard bundle out. So, the motherboard is a Gigabyte GA78LMT-USB 3. AM3 Plus boards on eBay still seem to go for quite a decent amount, so there is still some resale value here. I'd recommend a cheaper Ryzen chip, honestly, over even an FX 8000 series chip, but you know, if you can find an FX chip cheap as well as cheaper DDR3 RAM and a motherboard, then it's fine for those of you on a tighter budget. This cooler also looks pretty good. It's certainly not a standard boxed cooler for the FX chip as far as I know, and I honestly think it looks pretty good, and it should do a decent job of, or a more decent job of, keeping the CPU cool. This nice freebie hanging out the back here, whether it's a Wi-Fi, USB or Bluetooth USB adapter, is certainly a welcome inclusion. Yeah, this motherboard looks fairly good, and it's got 4 DDR3 slots too. Now, I wasn't sure that we'd actually find an FX 4000 series chip under here as advertised, because remember, this was advertised with 8 gigs of RAM and it turns out we had 20, so I was hoping that maybe we'd get a better chip, but unfortunately that wasn't the case, and we can't hope for too much, I guess. Now, if you do go down the pre-built route, then remember to always check the CPU cooler for dust, because as you can see here, there is some pretty thick dust going on here. Now, usually when I see dust like this that's sort of brown in colour, I assume that the previous owner had a pet of some sort. Obviously, you know, not a problem in the long run, it can be cleaned up, but I like to sort of try and identify where the dust came from, just so I can work out what materials I need to clean it. In most cases though, a microfiber cloth and an air duster will do the trick, maybe a slightly damp microfiber cloth. For the fan blades, as you can see, this has come up pretty nicely with just a couple of wipes, and it should now be ready to go back on our FX chip with a new daub of thermal paste, of course. Remember, all you need is a pea-size amount on the chip. Honestly, this cooler does look really good. I think it suits the motherboard as well. It's sort of an all black with the copper design there, and hopefully it does a good job of cooling the PC, providing the PC actually turns on. So I added 16 gigs of RAM back to the board, put everything back together in the case, which honestly was just as simple as moving a few cables around. I didn't film the process, I was going to film it outside and the rain started getting really heavy, so yeah, if you want me to do another build video, a proper build video, I'll do that very soon for a budget build. But yeah, everything's back in here now. It looks a lot neater than when it arrived, to say the least, but if it doesn't work, then we're in trouble. So, do you know what I just said about this not working, or the possibility of it not working? Well, guess what has just happened. I've switched this thing on, and whilst it does fire up here, as you can see, the Windows 10 installation is getting devices ready, there are two pretty, well, very noticeable red stripes down the screen, which tells me one thing, and that is that the graphics card is dying. Even after getting into Windows and installing the drivers, we were just put on a constant boot loop. Like, Windows did not enjoy the fact that the drivers were installed at all. The PC pretty much just gave up at this point. And yeah, after all that, putting things right, it turns out that the graphics card, I think this is actually the worst pre-built I've ever bought, and on that terrible disappointment, I guess it's time to end until the next one. After a few more attempts, I actually managed to get the card working, very briefly. Well, it got itself working, and I jumped into Red Dead 2, where we saw 30 FPS at 1080p low. Obviously, the on-screen gameplay isn't representative of the actual gameplay because it was a bit of a stuttery mess, whether or not this is just due to the age of the card or the fact that this card is moments away from extinction. Either way, thanks for watching this video. I'm sorry we couldn't test out this system a little bit more, but hopefully we can do something else with it in a not too distant future.